Hi, this is Ryan Parrott, and you're listening to the Radiant Black Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Radiant Black Podcast. This is a podcast focused on all things Massiveverse. Today, we are joined by a very special guest, TV writer and comic book writer, Ryan Parrott. How are you doing today, Ryan?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on.
For sure. Yeah, we've been looking forward to this for a while, ever since we spoke, prior, or I guess for the release of Supermassive, so we really enjoyed that. How was C2E2 and SDCC? We know you're just coming from there.
Honestly, I think it might be my favorite con. I know that'll make all the other cons jealous, but it's a really nice blend of like creators and artists and stuff like that. I think I was at San Diego, I think the week or two before, and as much as as a kid, I loved San Diego. That was like the best con to go in the world. But as you get a little older, I started realizing it's like so much of it is Hall H now that it's easy to get sort of lost in the chaos of it all. And it doesn't feel like it's as much about comics as it used to be. So I would say to you two is a nice little change. It feels like there's just a lot. I have a lot more fan interaction, a lot more there's a little more talent scouting, all that stuff. It's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And I gotta say, like last we spoke, I think it was just Rogue Sun Rogue Sun #1 that we had to look forward to, and now here we are, a whole arc later. So much has happened, I mean, we got the fallout to two parents, that we got Dylan in the middle, caught in between, and I just want to say, like, how does it feel now that we just finished the first arc and everyone's a little bit overwhelmed, but so many people have been talking about how good this comic book is, and honestly, I'm not even kidding. A lot of people saying that it's even better than Radiant Black.
Well, I don't tell Kyle that. Let's just I won't tell him. But no, it's really nice. It's the hardest part I think about when you're first sort of out there talking about a comic book is sort of you kind of get into a bit of a spiel where it's like you said the same, if you've listened to any interview I've done, it's like it's the same line over and over and over again. And so that can get a little tedious. So it's nice when you've actually got some material out there that you actually have something to talk about, something that you can talk about themes and you can be a little cryptic, and it's not just like I promise it's good. It's like you have a little bit of like, oh hey, what do you guys think? This is good. And so like I think that's the best part about it is it just sort of allows you to be a little more free to talk about it. It's so much about the early comic books is cryptic and promise, and it's nice to but I appreciate that I had a lot of nice people come up to me at the con and talked about how much they like the book, and I've seen some people online say they like it, so that's always nice.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's safe to say all four of us are huge fans of Rogue Sun so far. I've been looking forward to it from month to month, and I can't wait for issue 7. And personally, I've never read a Create Your Own Adventure comic book. So
you're in for a treat. It's fun.
What can we expect? Honestly, I'm going in kind of blind into this one, but I'm excited.
Did you never read them when you were a kid, like the novels or anything either?
No, never. This is the first time I heard about it too, so.
Oh yeah, so like I grew up, like I remember when I was a kid, like the library had like a whole bunch of them, and I remember like the day I found one, I was like, oh my god, these are amazing, and they're really fun because they're basically sort of these like there's like 1,000 different like branching, like you pick up the novel and you start reading, and I remember the one that always got me was like it was about this astronaut. It's like it opens with him like underneath his spaceship, and it's like he's like fixing it or something, and he drops his wrench. And it starts to float away from the ship, and it was like, do you A, go after let go of your line and go after the wrench, or B, let go, like forget it and get back in the ship? And I was like, well, I want my wrench back. And then you it says turn to page 27, and you turn to page 27, and there's like 3 lines. It's like you let go of the thing and drift off and die in space, and so you have to go back. It's such a depressing moment. So later on, as you start reading more, you start realizing if you get like you'd hold on to the old page, you turn to the one if there was like only 2 paragraphs, you just go back. But like that's the
save
fun
states,
of it,
baby.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. And so like I always loved that, and I just thought with a comic book and the page turns and like the pictures, it seems like there's a really cool opportunity to sort of do it to really use the medium sort of against you a little bit. And one thing that's kind of fun in the book, I don't think I've actually talked about this yet, but it's like when you turn to a page, some of the if you look, you'll like flip, like, I don't know, it's a bad example. Like if you turn to like page 16 and you're looking at and you're reading what the thing that happened on 16, if you happen to glance at the page next to it, you might have absolutely no idea what's going on, because that's an answer to like a different part of the book. I don't know if that makes sense, but like that's kind of the fun that in that doesn't work in the novels, but in the comics, it's like you can look over and be like, wait a minute, am I fighting a bad guy? Who's this guy? Like there's like a fun little thing where it kind of makes you want to go back and hopefully read all of them. But it's not. I took a different approach, which was like, I don't think it's going to be a lot of dead ends. It's more, it's the choices are the journey, is the story, if that makes sense. It's like the choices that you make. And I guess we can talk about spoilers at this point, right?
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, just assume anybody who's read this has read 6. So if you know at the end of 6 that Marcus is not there, the whole point of doing the story was the idea that since now Dylan's on his own, let's put the reader in the position of Dylan and have him try, like, okay, you want to do it on your own, let's see how well you do. And so that was the really fun part about doing it, is I found that it felt like a good spot for the story to take advantage of it thematically.
Are you guys setting page numbers?
Yes, we are. Yes, so it'll be a little easier. It'll be like, we actually have Michael Basudal's actually creating a whole sort of thing in it that was sort of like a structure to it, so you can actually look and see. Because if I had made you guys actually count every time, that would be the meanest thing I could do.
So would you say there is like a good ending, or like the correct ending that you reach after you do it a few times, or does it all kind of work out at the end, no matter which direction you go?
I'm not going to say either way, because sort of figuring out the ending is sort of the point. Okay. So that, if that makes sense, I might have already just said too much. But like that's the way that I wanted to approach it. I didn't want it to be something where somebody picked it up and reads 4 pages and goes, okay, well, that's the end. I didn't want it to be that way. I wanted you guys to get your money's worth. So like it has, like, I don't want to spoil anything, but like that's the fun of it. I think is actually seeing the different paths you take will inform hopefully on the point of the story, as opposed to it just being a lot of dead ends. It's more like, even if you take the right choices, those might not necessarily be the best choices. Does that make sense? Probably not.
Okay,
You'll see.
Cool.
I
Cool.
it.
Yeah.
That's exciting for sure. One thing for me that personally sticked out from the start is kind of like one of my favorite shows, The Boys. Mostly every single character, except Dylan, who's kind of shown like his motivations from the start, are kind of in the gray area. Do you think you write like this and make your characters like this kind of because you like the unpredictable nature of it all, or is it kind of to maybe put us in Dylan's shoes and put us in his perspective of not knowing the whole picture, maybe, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the inspiration for Dylan just kind of came out of, it was like an early conversation I had with Kyle, which was, he was saying about he was telling me about some of the big things he was doing and stuff that you guys haven't even heard of yet, like little things that he had told me before the book ever was written. He's like, I'd love to try this, love to try that. And I was like, wow, you're taking some big swings. And he said, he's like, and I've said this before on podcasts, but like when you're doing an independent comic book, which is Rogue Sun, even though it's Image and we're Massiverse, like it's still independent in the sense it's not the big two. Like if you're going to do a superhero book, you've got to take some chances and veer away from the things that you've seen the big two do. And I think that was sort of my approach to it when I was thinking about Dylan. I was just like, I want to try to make a character that isn't like all the characters that you've seen. I didn't want to make him like Dick Grayson or Peter Parker or Miles Morales or any of those guys who tend to be, good-hearted people. I liked the idea of somebody who was a little more selfish, somebody who was a little more fractured, someone who was a little bit more had a little rough around the edges, so that we had somewhere for that character to go and grow. So that was kind of the initial inspiration for it. Was like I'm like everybody. I love Breaking Bad. I love those types of really heavy sort of dramas, and usually the ones that I like the most, the ones that have the most sort of complicated main characters, people that you kind of aren't sure if you're buying into why they're doing the things they're doing. And I remember Eric Kripke, as you said about The Boys, one of the things he said early on was, and I always thought this was a good point, was when he worked on Revolution, he was like, a character can can say anything they want. They can be the meanest person in the world, but if they do the right things, the audience will usually forgive them. And I thought that was like, he talked about Dean Winchester a lot. Like, Dean is brash and arrogant and condescending and makes fun of people, but because he's saving the world and because he's out there helping and trying to do the right thing and ultimately sacrifices himself when he needs to, because he does those things, the audience usually is like, it's like Han Solo, right? Han Solo is a jerk, but like, because he shows up and tries to save Luke at the end, it's like, that's, we forgive him. And so that was kind of my approach to Dylan. Like, I think that's what I wanted you to slowly get to know him, is like, he pretends, or not even pretends, he is not a nice person in a lot of ways, but at the end of the day, he is still putting his life on a line and going out there and trying to help people, which is more than I can say for myself. So
that's great. How long? I read when I was reading the series, I'm thinking like, okay, well, this guy's parents are definitely divorced. Like, there's no question here. And I really appreciate that story. I know what it's like to be living in like two worlds, especially with a bad divorce. How long did you know that? Like, how long have you been formulating the story, knowing that you wanted to have a comic book that focused on this familiar conflict?
I mean, that was from the very, very beginning. I knew that the mother was the killer. That was always the expectation, because I wanted it to sort of be, and you can't really pitch it, so you have to find different ways to talk about it. But I was like, I wanted to be a metaphor for a messy divorce. And the idea is that, but you just put superpowers in the middle of all of it, because like just to say it, hopefully my parents don't ever listen to this. Maybe, maybe they will. Is that my parents had a very messy divorce when I was a kid, and never to this day are not friendly with each other. And it's and the funny thing is, as I got older, like, I started to learn more and more things. It's like they even ironically enough, they actually sheltered me from a lot of the really bad stuff when I was a kid. It was only when I got older I was like, wow, you guys really hated each other. And so I always thought that was something interesting. But they would, there was a lot of times when I would spend, summers with one of them and then go back and forth, that they would say things about the other. Both of them would say things about the other one that was designed, I think, in some ways to try and get me to be sympathetic to their side of the story. And I thought that's what's super interesting to me in this story, is you give this kid superpowers and then you put him in between two people who were sort of at war for him, and ultimately have him sort of make a decision. I knew the end of 6 was going to be him telling them that they're both wrong and sort of like treading his own path. But that's not going to be easy. Obviously, the easier path would have probably been for him to just side with his father and go along with that. But he has so much resentment built up over, 15 years. There's no way he could do that. And I think, unfortunately, that's going to hurt him in the long run.
Brilliant. Yeah, the way you've done it and you fleshed it out is genius, because you have the parents that they don't want their kid to be in the dark and suffer, but they don't want to hurt each other's image of the parents, and how much that veneer wears off. It's like, okay, I'll tell you how bad the parent really is, because I've seen this stuff as you get older. Like, that's a brutal way to do it. And I just want to say, like, masterfully done. And this series, it does feel fresh in a genre that's been done thousands of times. I think you nailed it.
Thank you. I'm a little nervous because, like, I knew pretty strongly what I wanted the first 6 issues to be going into, and I knew kind of what I wanted the next 6 to be, in sort of like, but it was more about Dylan and less about like the family. It was more like me so I'm trying to figure that out, and it's this, I'm still trying to figure it out, like, sort of that balance of character and plot, like I really liked in Go-Go, when I started writing Go-Go Power Rangers, like, I realized that the mandate on the book was like 70% high school life, 30%, like monsters. And what that did for me was it sort of forced me to sort of like write a lot more character stuff, a lot more like detail stuff like high school. And I really liked that. And so I'm trying to find a way to get back into that. However, the problem is that what made that easy for Power Rangers was everybody who was picking up the comic books, in my opinion, was somebody who already knew about the world. They knew who Rita was. They knew how the powers worked. They knew how the Zords. So I didn't have to explain any of that. It's a little different when you're writing your own book, and I have to find that balance of like, okay, this is character, but like, I also have to, like, you don't know who the villains are. You don't know what the general structure of the world is. So you have to find that balance of character and world building and plot. And that's something that is a little new to me, because I'm not playing from the playing card of, like, the Power Rangers.
Yeah, I mean, Honestly, I just gotta say, like, as someone who also has divorced parents, and oh shit, I just realized like three of us now have a divorced parent, so this could easily be like the divorced parents podcast. But for the sake,
Oh, just check my phone. My parents just split up too.
Oh man.
Anyway, I do want to commend the dialogue and just the overall nuance. I think reading issue 5 and 6 especially, you could tell that yeah, like it's raw, it's very well done, and it's especially this like tonally the way you write Dylan and everyone else at school as opposed to the parents. Like there's a huge shift where we see. I feel like you write such a good teenage Dylan, and then we move to the parents, and you could feel like the bitterness there. And I just yeah, it's just very powerful stuff. I think multiple people were talking about how good Rogue Sun number 6 was in the Discord, and we had just conversation go on forever. So that was really awesome. So knowing about Radiant Black, we also know that Marshall, he has like some issues with his parents. So I've always wondered, and we seen in Supermassive that it was only Marcus that got to know Marshall so far, and he has yet to meet Dylan. So do you think that him and Dylan would get along just based on some of the shared just some of the shared experiences they have?
I don't at all, actually. I think that we were talking about this the other day. We actually were having dinner in Chicago, and we were talking about that relationship of. I think Kyle just texted me. Yeah, he did. Anyways, sorry, Kyle. I'm busy talking to your podcast. Leave me alone. We were talking about that at dinner, and I said, because it's funny, because Marshall's like, what? Marshall's almost 30. Is he 30?
I think
like
so,
late
yeah.
20s.
Seems
30,
like he is.
Yeah. Dylan's 17. So like, well, the funny thing to me was Dylan would just roast Marshall. Like he would not. If you've ever been around a smart ass 17-year-old and you're a little bit older, like because I always felt like this. Like when you're in high school, like like when you're in high school, 90% of your life is just trying to figure out how to navigate and trash talk with your friends. And like, you know what I mean? Like it's either if it's before class or after class, at lunch, before, like it's just all day long. It's like it's just social navigation. When you get out of that, you lose a little bit of that. You lose a little bit of that sort of like armor. And I feel like Dylan would just absolutely make fun of Marshall all the time. And Kyle disagrees with me, but I don't think Marshall would handle it great. in the same way that Marshall kind of dealt with Marcus. You know how Marshall was sort of smart talking with Marcus. I feel like it would be the exact. I feel like that you would invert that relationship, and it would be Dylan would not be friends with him. Like they would just be. Those two guys are too similar to get along.
I can picture him walking past him on the porch, Marshall on the porch, and it
Yeah, I
not
was
going
just
well.
about to say,
Exactly.
He'd be one of those kids from the high
He'd be
school.
one of those kids.
Yeah, he'd be with
Yep.
them. That's
Yep.
awesome. I look forward to the beating at Supermassive 20.
Oh, so do I, man. I hope. I hope. I can't wait for that. And I've already told Kyle, I was like, I get to write at least one of those scenes. He's like, all right.
So we've seen a bunch of different characters, especially villains, so far. From Demonica to Suave, and even the guy who gave Suave the spider that he ate. But I'm mostly interested in Suave because since he ate that spider, we really haven't seen or heard much from him since then. Can we expect to see a little bit more of him in the next arc, you think?
I just wrote a scene with him yesterday. So, yes, you will see him in the next arc, I promise. And we'll learn a lot more about Suave's relationship to the voice and where he fits into the big picture. Like, I think that's the fun part of the next arc is that you'll start to understand a little bit more about who Marcus was fighting against and the stakes of all of that. Like I hinted at it a lot in the first part and of the first arc, and I think the next one is going to be Dylan. We'll slowly be learning like, oh, there's a bigger story going on around here than I realized.
Yeah, he's got the tomb, and I know that the quill's not far behind. I'm interested to see where that goes for sure.
There you go.
Yeah, he's been in business for 20. Like he was in business for 20 years. Marcus wasn't. Like it is just that I can't even imagine like all the stuff he's been through. And actually, one of the questions I had for you is one of my absolute favorite things is the Perrine jewelry. And I wanted to know like if you had any influence of that, or like was that an idea you had from the start, or how did that come into play?
I don't remember exactly when it came up. So it's named after my grandmother. My grandmother's name was Dorothy Perrine, and my grandfather called her Dot. So that's why it's Dottie Perrine. I named her after my grandmother.
Awesome.
But I don't know when I came up with it, but I always liked the idea. You know what? I think I might have, now that I think about it. I wonder if this will get me in trouble. Have you guys ever seen is it Return to Oz?
No. Oh, yeah, the James
yeah.
Franco one.
No.
Oh.
Return to Oz is like this dark
Oh.
sequel that they made in like the 90s with Faraj Kabul or whatever like that. It's check it out. It's online somewhere, I'm sure. But it's this really dark like story. It's not a musical, but it's based off of, I think, some of the later novels. Anyways, there is I never realized until I said it. I think you just told me where I came up with it. There is a scene in the third act of the movie where they go up against the Gnome King and he imprisons a lot of the members of like the Scarecrow and the Tin Man. They're all imprisoned in these jewels. And I think I might have inherently stolen the idea from that movie, because that movie scared the hell out of me when I was a little kid. When you watch it, trust me, there's some stuff in there that is not meant for little kids. But anyways, I think it's what I stole. But I always loved the idea of, I mean, it was me answering the larger question, which is like, if you are a superhero that has been fighting big supernatural bad guys that like literally like you can't just throw them in a prison. That's not going to work. So I was like, there had to have been something that he was putting these places. And I loved the idea of sort of like literally in the middle of New Orleans, you have this prison that no one knows about that has all of these gems. And it's like, if anything ever goes wrong there, that would be a very, very bad thing. But I thought there was something really, and it ended up, there's a lot of mythology that I really liked. I like the idea that there was a warden, and the only idea that I liked is that if you watch, I think it's like one of the scenes at the end of issue 3 or 2, maybe it's the end of issue 3, yeah, where she's talking to the gems, but she's not like mean to them. She's literally trying to sort of like,
they're trying to,
yeah, they're having movie night. She's trying to like get through to them and talk to them, and they have that stuff. So like you're gonna see more of Dottie talking to the people at the Perrin Jewelry at some point. But I looked at it more like it's not just like a prison. It's actually Dottie has, she doesn't want to keep everybody in there forever. She wants to let some people out. So how do you sort of rehabilitate like supervillains and stuff like that? So like there's a lot of fun stuff in there that I want to touch on as we go forward.
Yeah, it works on like the stuff like the magical world hiding from the world we know, and it's just hidden in plain sight in the jewelry store. And I really want to see like a bejeweled Furby with like ghosts in the gems and stuff like that. That'd be wild. But yeah, I think it's a really genius way to do it, and I think it's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, the Rogues Gallery has been like one of the absolute like best things. Actually, a question I have, I don't know if you can actually answer this or not, but at the beginning of issue 5, when the mom was giving birth to Dylan, Marcus actually mentions a Minotaur with a flaming sword. Is that maybe someone we could see trapped in one of those jewels, or maybe he could still be out there? Is that someone we could be seeing in the future?
I think you might see that character earlier than I expected. It's funny that you brought that up. That's very astute. Yeah, I'm spoiling everything. But yeah, that character was some fun. There's some that one, and I think you might see what was the one in Supermassive I came up with? The one that Marcus fights on the river. That guy's going to be back too at some point. They'll all like, I don't waste any part of the Buffalo when it comes to villains. If I mention a villain, I guarantee you will see them at some point.
Good, because if I don't see the Alienator, I will be sad. I hope the design lives up to that awesome name. Jesus.
Sometimes I will be honest. Sometimes, and this is probably breaking the illusion for some people, one of my favorite things sometimes to do is to just like come up with a name for a character or like a picture of them and not know what you're going to do with it and just hold on to it. And then when you're writing and you're going along, you just go, oh, and you can like drop it in and you look like a genius, but you really are just kind of like, it's like a way of tricking your brain into like tying threads together and stuff like that. It's not that I do that all the time, but every once in a while I will just like do that and be like, okay, I'll come up with that later.
Yeah. I that's actually what my next question is regarding something in that nature. So you mentioned in the Discord when you had that brief Q&A session when you were waiting for your flight that you were taking inspiration from Mortal Iron Fist a little bit for some of the next stuff you're going to do with Rogue Sun regarding if we might see like previous users. But at one point I remember in one of the issues, in one of the more recent issues, I think Ori or Brock says that one of them says that because Marcus died while he was wearing the suit and using the stone, that his soul is bonded to the suit. So is there a chance that there are other? I mean, there probably is, I guess, but is there a chance that we're gonna see other people who've died in the suit and their souls have bonded to it now that Marcus is supposedly honored his end of the deal?
I will just say that one of the fun, I'm going to have to be a little cryptic here. One of the fun things I think about creating legacy heroes is playing with that concept of how long have they been around, who's worn the armor or the suit before them, what kind of person was that, and the fun of potentially seeing them, interacting with them. I think that's the fun of doing these characters. I have always really loved, like, I loved my favorite issue of Spawn ever is the medieval Spawn issue with the Violator narrating. I think it's issue like 7 of that series, and I loved that because I read that as a kid and I was like, first Neil Gaiman. It's Neil Gaiman, which is really helpful. But it was such a cool, like, oh my gosh, there was Spawns before Spawn. That's amazing. And then the way that story was told, I always loved. So I've always loved that part, and so knowing that I could create something like Rogue Sun and hint at the fact that there have been Rogue Suns before them, and just to say it, like, I don't necessarily want to spoil too much, but like it's a power, not necessarily a mantle. So it's not, who's to say who the people that held on to had the Rogue Sun before were good or bad and what they used it for. And I feel like that's something that I want to explore if given the opportunity. So, I mean, that's the bestest, without directly saying yes or no. I will say those are the things that I get excited about as a writer. If and when you'll see them will depend, I think, on the story and Dylan's journey and sort of where we find ourselves going forward. Is that okay?
Oh, no, that's fantastic. And I have 2 more questions based on that one. So the first one is, and they're both brief. The first one is, we just found out, this big spoiler alert for everyone listening. We just found out in Radiant Black number 16 that, and I guess because Kyle showed some people at Suti too, that in Radiant Black number 17, there's going to be like Nathan and Marshall using it at the same time, the power. So they're both Radiant Black. So is the Sunstone similar in the sense that can the power be split between multiple people?
Did he confirm that? I didn't know he confirmed that. Was that confirmed?
So I mean, so we see Nathan show up at the end of 16, and then someone who went to C2E2 told us that Kyle basically said that they'll both be, like, at least in issue 17, they'll both be Radiant Black.
Well,
so.
I cannot confirm nor deny that. So I will
Okay.
I will leave that. I don't want to speak out of school, especially with the amount of work Kyle puts into stuff.
Okay.
But I can only speak to Rogue Sun as a character. And I would say I don't necessarily think it can be split. I think if you are the holder of the Rogue Sun, you are the Rogue Sun. But I do know how the power set works, and there is a caveat that here's the best way I can explain it. You haven't seen the full extent of the powers and how it's wielded yet. Does that make? I don't know if that's as cryptic as I can get. So, like,
no, that's awesome.
Forward, you'll understand. As we go forward, you'll eventually understand. Oh, that's what the Rogue Sun is. That's how it works. And oh, wow, that's stuff. Like I think whenever the idea was to do the series for as long as people will read it. So, like, I think we as obviously you guys, you're the Invincible is something that Kyle and I both worship and look at as sort of like the gold standard of superheroes comic books. And so we both went into our stories thinking about how that story unfolded, how they were able to change and use the characters and the stories and the powers in different ways, and planning long term. And so we've definitely looked at ours and tried to model ourselves after Robert Kirkman's approach. So, like, there's definitely things that we have only hinted at, and that will hopefully, if we get to issue 30, we'll be like, okay, now we can unfold that part. So that would be cool. So yeah, we're thinking about stuff. Yeah.
Awesome. And my last question based on the power set for now is, in one of the issues, I believe it's 3, Dylan, after he encounters the roadkill looking guy, I forgot his name, but he's a super cool character, by the way. Is the whip,
yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, after he encounters him, he tells, he finds out that Brock's trying to get the death sage or whatever it was to communicate with Marcus. He tells Brock at some point in that conversation that he's only holding on to the stone right now because, he's not old enough, and then when he's old enough, he'll give it to Brock. I don't want to know like whether that eventually happens or not. I just want to know in that moment, does Dylan actually mean what he says, or is he just saying that to appease Brock?
I honestly think he's if I'm being fair, I think he probably was just telling the kid what he wanted to hear to make him feel better. I don't think he actually meant it. Or to be fair, maybe he did and he had no intention of keeping the stone long term. I don't think he's. Here's the thing. I think that opinion it's sort of Schrodinger's cat, right? It's both at the same time. It definitely could be that he meant it at that moment. It also might be that by issue 9, he's like, I'm ready to hand it off, kid. So like, he might, as things get better or worse, he might be more inclined to share it. I think depending on, how he is as a person going forward. But I think in that moment, I think he was literally just being like, saw a kid that was in pain and somebody who was missing a father. And I think he totally understood that. And I think that's where he was looking at it. Like, I think Dylan has a lot of problems when it comes to opening up to people and being nice to people and not taking what he wants and doing what he wants. But I do think he has a sympathy for people who have father issues, because he has a lot himself.
Awesome.
I guess he's not totally an asshole. I guess
I hope
he
not.
has some good qualities. In the last issue, there was a panel towards the end when Juliet, right? That's the mom's name.
Yes.
When she invites him over to stay with them, she's telling Brock and Ari he's coming to join them. And then she says, Dylan, Brock. I just want to say that little part kind of broke my brain because I read it as Dylan Brock will show you to your room. But is there any inspiration from Dylan Brock that came into Rogue Sun at all, or is that just purely coincidence?
Brock's definitely Damian Wayne, right?
Yeah. I think Dylan Brock. I didn't even know who Dylan Brock was. I just look it up. Sorry.
That's hilarious.
No, I think definitely. You can definitely see the Bat family influences in the concept of. So I always knew that Dylan was going to after they discovered that his mom was the villain, I was like, okay, he's 17. He can't live by himself. And I thought there was something really interesting about the idea of like, well, what if he ends up having to move into the house with the family, his father's other family? And I was just like, that is going to be weird. Like the weird combination of people and it's not going to be easy. But I was like, it also could be, and who's to say it might not be the best or worst thing that ever happens to him. So what I liked is the idea, because it's also a bit, I would spend every summer with my, when I would go every summer when my parents were divorced, I would spend it in Bakersfield with my father and his stepfamily. But my dad worked 9 to he was a dentist and he worked 9 to 5 every day. So it was just me and my stepmother and her two boys. So it was just that was my family for 3 months, and they weren't big fans of me, and there was a lot of problems there. And so but you learn a lot by being in those situations. And I thought, well, that would be a really interesting thing to throw Dylan in, because Dylan for a little while has been sort of like, he's the man of the house for so long, and now suddenly he's thrown into a place where that's not the case. And I just thought there was a lot of fun to be had from having them be there. So yeah, you can see there definitely Brock has a little Damien in there. I think Ari probably has a little Barbara. But I think Juliet's been the most fun character to sort of write in this next arc, because one, I had a very different idea of what I wanted to use her as opposed to Gwen. Like this is a very different mother. This is a mother who has spent her entire life working with her husband was a superhero for 20 or for the last 12 or 15 years of their lives. So she's lived with this already in a way that Gwen never did. And I feel like that's going to have her have a very different perspective on what it means to be Rogue Sun and but she's also a mother. So I think that was a really interesting combination. She has that built-in sort of understanding of when Marcus would, fly off and fight a villain at night. She did that. She dealt with that every single night for 12 years. At some point, you're going to have a different perspective on that than Gwen, who didn't like the idea of Dylan ever leaving. So I just feel like there's a lot of fun stuff to play there. I mean, I don't want to call her Alfred, but there's definitely she's definitely more in line with Alfred than she would be with Catwoman, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
She's sexy Alfred. We're going with sexy
Yeah.
Alfred. Yeah.
Oh, okay. There we go.
I like that. Sexy Alfred.
One thing I love you actually put into question is like a hero's livelihood. When we hear like Marcus has been like stealing little bits of money as like rewards, like off of the people like he saves, he does a bank robbery, he'll take a bit of cash, whatever. How do you think, like, I just love that perspective, because how do you think a superhero could make money with all the time they dedicate to saving these people without having like a Justice League or an Avengers credit card? You know what I mean?
That's exactly what I was thinking about. Like, I was like, well, because like I remember when I first wrote it down, it was like, oh, Gwen says like he married into money, and I was like, yeah, but like if his job is literally to sort of like there's a scene in, I think it's the 4th issue maybe, where Gwen sits down to Dylan and sort of tells her what she thinks about the father, and she says, you know, he's somebody who believes because he saves you, you owe him. And the idea is like, if I'm going to save the world, what's the big deal of me taking a few extra bucks to pay for my kids? Because I have to do that. If I have to do a day job and I have to work there all day, I can't save you. So like, and I know that that's some of the mentality that I've heard about some corrupt cops doing when they steal from drug dealers. Like, well, you know, I'm risking my life to stop this. What's the problem with me getting a few bucks to take care of my kids in case something happens to me? And like, you know, and I think, you know, obviously that's a complicated answer, but like, I thought there was something really cool about a superhero. I think if you are a superhero that is used to saving people all the time and is in some ways, you know, like it would be hard. I think it would be very hard to not become arrogant and not think of yourself as being special or above the law, or to be fair, what Marcus did all those years was above the law anyways. He would take these people and he put them in jail. He didn't take them to the police. He didn't throw them. He didn't give them to, you know, like he is above the law when it comes to fighting and saving our world. So it's like, why would he think that those laws have anything to do with stopping him from doing the things that he would want to do? He literally believes in his own moral center. His moral compass is everything. And so I just thought there was something interesting to play off of that, because I was asking that exact same question of, well, what if that's how he got some of his money? And to be fair, maybe Gwen's wrong. Maybe Gwen said that as a lie to get Dylan to, because if you listen, Marcus never acknowledges that she's correct. He says she lies. So it could be a lie, but I just thought it was an interesting question that I thought had a fun answer.
There's been talk this week of James Gunn saying he's not going to address any more Easter eggs in the first movie, and when they're filming the third Guardians movie. Are there any like glaring Easter eggs that you left out there in the first 6 issues that haven't been discovered yet?
There are. There's one.
Okay.
There's only one, and it will probably be addressed by issue 12, and then it won't, and then you'll be able to figure it out. Right now it's just sort of sitting there. I don't know. Okay. That's not helpful, but yeah.
No, that's great. Love it.
Yeah, so I've got a few more questions as well. My first one is in Rogue Sun number 4. There's a moment where I noticed this today on the reread, where Marcus says, Dylan, every day forces you barely. Oh, no, sorry. He says, if we want to make sure your mom doesn't have to put you in the ground next to me, you'll need the Blackfire. And at this point of the time, like when you're reading, it's not like we don't know yet that, you know, his mom has anything to do with the death and anything. Was this like a hint at what's to come? Is this deliberate?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I'll give credit to that line. So for issue 7, I'm having a co-writer come on board with me just because I needed help there's a buddy of mine from college named Nick Cotton who was somebody who helped me with all of my early films and projects, and is somebody that reads almost everything I've done for almost my entire life. And he's really into puzzles and games and like that. And with the Choose Your Own Adventure, it just seemed like an obvious, like, hey man, do you want to come on and do this? Because he's one of the few people I will ever give a script to and be like, hey, if you have any notes or changes, just write them in and I'll adjust it. And he actually changed that line in a pass where I gave him the script, and I thought I was like, that's a little on the nose, man. He's like, no one's gonna catch it. I was like, okay, and I loved it. I'm so glad that someone actually caught it, because it was literally trying to allude to the fact that yes, she was the killer. I did think, because I wanted to try to play fair with the readers, I do think, you know, like I didn't give you too many hints that she was the killer. But I think
you did a good job.
Okay, cool. But I wanted to play fair, but I didn't want it to be too obvious. It's a weird balancing act, because you never know. But
It
yeah,
No,
wasn't, but you had
it
me
was
feeling
fantastic.
stupid.
Yeah,
You had me
yeah.
feeling
I
stupid that I
felt
didn't
stupid
catch it.
too. Yeah.
Genius.
Me too.
You
Yeah.
did it.
Yeah.
go
It was
Cal.
only on the
Yeah,
reread today
honestly.
that I realized that line, so I haven't read it. But yeah, another one is, and I also realized this today while I was rereading the issues. So, and I've reread. I usually read everything Massiverse twice anyway, just
Cool.
to make sure I understand it. So this is like third or fourth time. But I noticed that Dylan, there's a point in issue 6 where when he's complaining, or when he's he's between the fight between Marcus and Cataclysm, he just like swings his hand and punches her, but then he says, "That wasn't me. What the hell was that? Did you?" And then Marcus says it wasn't him. Was that actually not either of them,
No,
or
that
is
was
Marcus
that was
lying?
Marcus. That was
Okay,
Marcus. Like Marcus
okay,
didn't know that he had that in him.
okay.
But like so he wasn't trying to punch her, but like
Mhm.
if you look at the panel, you can see his hand behind the hand and they're both cocked in the
Yep.
same manner. So
Yeah.
yeah, the idea was that in his fury, Marcus was able to move the suit with one punch. One, because I mean, if I'm being clearly honest, I was like, I needed the fight to escalate. And two, I was like, there's no way Dylan will ever hit his mom. Like, there's no way.
Yeah.
But then I was
No,
like, but
no,
Marcus
that's
might. And I thought there was something cool about maybe if you were that sort of emotionally distressed and you were connected to the suit, you could tap into that for a moment. And I thought there was something cool about that.
that's amazing. Thank you.
Like what Bash was talking about with lines that are foreshadowing. I don't know if this actually is foreshadowing or not, but in the first issue, we see Cataclysm wears like green, right? It's just isn't just me colorblind as hell, right? Green.
No, she's green. Yeah, she's in green.
Cool. And I noticed, I think you probably know what I'm going to say then, with the first line we get of the exterior of their house, and when we're introduced to the mother, we hear, and turkey and cheese. Also, the bread in here is green, and it's like in bold. I don't know if that's done purposely, but it's weird that a connection that like the green color is just like her color, and then it's mentioned there. Was that on purpose?
I don't think that one was. I think that was more the fact that like I'm really bad about getting rid of bread. And like I will literally go, I need a sandwich, and it's like that's 3 weeks old, and I was like, no, I can't eat that. So yeah, that's more of a tip to my laziness than anything in the story. But yeah, there is stuff like that we do think about. Usually that stuff comes in like later lettering passes where like you'll write a whole issue, and then right before it goes to like the final lettering, you'll start from what's the cool thing about comics that I don't know if people talk about that I really love is like, so when you write, usually it's like you're usually if you're on schedule, you're usually like 1 or 2 issues ahead of the previous. So you'll like write a script, right? And then you'll hand it off to the artist. And then if you're good, you'll start to write the next script or work on the one after that. By the time you get it back from colorist, you're usually on the second or third script. So like I'll do the lettering pass for 1 while I'm writing 3. And so you'll start these, your head's in what's coming up. And so you'll be able to slightly adjust some of the lettering lines to sort of pay stuff off or connect to things that you wouldn't know, that you usually can't do in the moment when you're writing the script. But it's nice. It's one of the few things that I think TV has that a little bit. It's not so much now because of the binging of it all, but I love that element. I love that I can like go back and go, oh, that's what I meant to, I can take a line of dialogue and focus it because I know where the story's going to be in 2 issues.
That's true. It's a good point. You don't think about that either. You don't see that addressed that often, but it is nice. It's like you're just improving on your own work. It's like having like a time stone and being able to go back in time and then like edit it before it's even out. It's genius that the story's always in flux.
Yeah, I mean, comics as a medium have so many cool elements that I think, I mean, we talk about this all the time. Like, yeah, we talked about it at C2E2 at dinner all the time. It's just like finding elements of the medium that like just like lean into that, and it makes it and it can like there's a thing that I was gonna say it, but I don't want to ruin it because I might actually do it. Like, okay, I did this in Oberon. It's a book that I did before that I really loved. There's a point where the girl it's a story about like the fairy king. It takes this girl on like to like, she's got powers and he like trains her and stuff. It's like a weird Doctor Who story. Anyways, long story short, they go to this place called the Endless Labyrinth. And in the labyrinth, what I did on one of the pages was they're like trying to get out of it. And I told the artist, like, just draw the same page 3 times. Or just draw me 1 page. And then I printed it 3 times and I changed the dialogue in all 3 pages because they're trapped in a labyrinth and they're going through like a loop. And I was like, that's something that you can't do in any other medium. You can't do that in novels. You can't do that in movies. I mean, but like you can do it in comic books. And I think that was something like, that's something that I think if you can find little things like that, like that's the thing that I think that when Kyle talks about Radiant Black, going forward. Like that's the stuff that I think he gets really excited about. Is like yeah, obviously issue 10, the blacklight issue, like that's something that was like you can only do that in comics, and like I feel like whenever you can find those, that's what makes these comics, that's what makes this whole process fun, is like finding those and looking for those. And that's what I'm trying to do, and I think it's what we're all trying to do, is just like lean into the medium whenever you can, and it makes it better.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, sorry, man.
No, I mean, we say it all the time, but you guys, what you were doing, like the Massiverse team, I mean, the Choose Your Own Adventure, you're doing it. You're doing that kind of stuff that can only really be done in this medium, even though you can do that in normal novels. Doing that in comics, I can't imagine how you're going to make art sequences connect to each other and how you can play off of that. I can't imagine. I know that you definitely probably already published a baller script on it, and it's going to be a challenge. One question I have is the filter is really interesting. It's like an overlay that kind of like adds, like, it's almost like, I can't quite describe it. It's kind of like a film overlay. Was that a choice that you made, or was that something that Abel came up with, or you guys both came up with together?
The film, what do you mean exactly?
It's kind of like a little like overlay over the in like the art. It almost has like a little like static kind of look to it. I can't really describe it, but it's like the overall look. There's like a shading. I can't really describe it. It's like there's
that's probably Chris O'Halloran, honestly. Like he brought so much to the book, and just I don't think I ever really fully appreciated how much a colorist dictates the tone and style of your book until Chris came in. Like Chris is like the most stoic dude. We've only ever talked in email, and he's very like, cool, man. And I'm like, I'll gush about stuff. He's like, thank you. And I was like, all right, cool. It's like, I'm not getting a lot, but like such a talented colorist. And I think some of that, like he brought such a specific, like, muted visual tone to the book. Like, okay, if you've read my Power Ranger books, you read those books and they are they are very colorful. But I was like, I love that Rogue Sun is not. Rogue Sun is muted and darker and plays. I think that's kind of where you see that grain. Like, there's just not even on the brightest days, it's still kind of the oranges are muted. The whole color palette's muted. So I feel like that's probably half Abel, half Chris. It's just them working together.
Okay, great. Yeah, we've gone a long time without talking about the art, but obviously it's amazing because you guys are all firing on all cylinders, and it's really, it feels like you're watching a movie. A lot of the Massiverse stuff, you can feel like there's like, you have the TV writer background, Kyle has the director kind of stuff. It just feels like something that can easily be adapted, and it makes it so much more immersive. Oh,
thank you. I mean, we definitely talk about it a lot. I think Kyle is such a technical brain when it comes to that stuff. Like he is like, I don't have a lot of notes. I'm like, yeah, that looks cool. And Kyle's always like, all right, hold on, drop the sepia here, blah, 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 blah. Like he's way more technical about that stuff. And I trust him so much because he just has such a good barometer for that stuff. But yeah, like it's like Abel is it's nice to have. I've been very, very lucky to work with some very talented artists, like, I've worked with Dan Mora and Marco Renna and Abel and just like a bunch of people. And I'm living out 50, and I apologize to all you guys. But like when you work with people that just, you don't have to give them notes, because I think it's kind of like that thing that writers talk about with actors, where it's like a good actor can take any line and make it good. And I feel like that's the way with some artists too. It's like there are artists who can take the most boring, like, scripted page and make it amazing, and or can take an idea that you didn't realize and make it 10 times better. And like that's the cool thing about working with like Abel and Chris and all the people in Rook. So it feels like I haven't really ever written a page where I was like that didn't work, because they made it work. And I'm sure that it didn't work, but they were talented and made it work. So that's really nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and we've talked about the art and the colors multiple times in the podcast so far. It really fits the vibe and even like enhances the vibe of the book. And I can't wait to dig back into it on my next reread. And speaking of, the trade paperback comes out on August 24th in a couple of weeks. Is there anything special in there that can we expect? Something extra, like how the Radiant Black trades have the Radiant language in the back? Anything like that?
I don't know for trade one if we were able to do that, because we were a little bit up against the time slot. So I think it's just pretty much the standard trade stuff. But and that's on me, because I'm lazy and Michael has great ideas, and then I'm like, we'll do it, and then we run out of time. But I think there is something that we might do that will come out at the same time as the trade that will be for free.
Okay.
Now that I've said it, I think I just committed us to doing it. It was something. So we will. It'll just be something. It was an idea that I had that I thought was like, well, because like we're taking the month off because of the trade coming out. And I was like, I don't want to do nothing. And I had an idea for something that we could do. So that might not be on the trade, but it will be available online for free.
Okay, I'll be looking forward to that for sure.
All right, now I got to do it. All right, okay, cool.
Oh, that's awesome. One last question, or actually two quick questions for me. One more so just pure curiosity. If you could team Dylan up with either like Marvel or a DC character, like just one of my favorite issues is like the Invincible crossing over with Spider-Man. Got that quick time with Robert Kirkman, and like if you could do that once, is there a character that really stands out to you if you got a chance?
Well, it's fun. Like, that's a good question because, like, is it better to team up with somebody that's just like him, or is it more fun to like have him go contrast with somebody who would never team up with in the world? Like him and Deadpool would be amazing. Like, I just feel like Deadpool and Rogue Sun would just because I feel like Rogue's like Dylan would, like Deadpool would start talking to the fourth wall and Dylan would be like, "Who are you talking to, man?" Like, it'd be fun.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think like what's a good one. I feel like that would be fun, and I think it would be awesome to have him hang out with I said this before. Somebody told, like, I had this idea. Somebody asked me on the AMA Discord thing about like if you could pick any book you want to do for the big two, would you do? And I was like, I'd love to do a Gambit and Rogue like New Orleans noir. And I was like, so like have Rogue Sun show up in the middle of that would be super cool. I think Dylan hanging out with Rogue and Gambit would be a really funny fifth wheel.
Yeah, that would be incredible. I had one last question for you. All this black market merchandise we've been getting, and just the Rogue Sun just has probably the best design, like one of the best designs I've ever seen, like from a character wise. Like the first time you see him, you're just like, holy crap! Like it's just absolutely stunning. But can we expect like a shirt or something anytime soon?
Yeah, we're working on it. I have like 4 or 5 designs that I sort of threw to Michael to sort of talk through. But yeah, we're gonna definitely get some stuff up on it'll probably most likely be on the Black Narrative website. So it'll be available the same way that the stuff for Radiant Black is available. But yeah, I mean, look, sorry. I used to design like clothes and stuff when I was like in my 20s and stuff like that. So like it's just finding the time to blow the dust off of Adobe Photoshop and get back to work. So
love it.
Yeah. So one thing that we also, we asked the Discord if they had any questions before we went live. So there were actually a couple of questions. So one is from your boy Chips Ahoy. Wow, that actually rhymes. I like that. There we go. He says, I seem to remember hearing you had been working on Rogue Sun before the Massiverse. How much, if at all, did being part of something bigger like that affect the story and the ideas you had?
That's a good question and very, very, very astute, Chips Ahoy. I would say I've discovered that the ideas that have worked out the best for me are usually ones that I just keep coming back to. Like Dead Day is another comic I did, and I went back the other day and I found 4 different versions of that story that I'd written for different mediums before I ever got to the comic book. Like it was just like I had this one was like a radio play that I'd written that I was excited about doing. One was a play. One was a radio play that I had actually pitched to a company as like a fake like mockumentary style story of like what if this was actually happening and how to react to it. And so anyways, but like I guess I just kept trying to it wasn't until somebody was like, are you interested in doing a comic book, that I took that same idea and I went, oh wait, what if it would work that way and I could do it sort of like The Walking Dead. And so like and there was something similar with Rogue Sun. It was like I had played with the idea of and I think the general concept was of the idea of a superhero who's the legacy superhero who dies and haunts the next incarnation. I think that I had written it as I'd pitched it, I think maybe to Marvel or DC at some point down the line as sort of like a one-off for a villain. And I had sort of played with it as a TV pilot. I've done a lot of different versions. And it wasn't until Kyle, when I was in the middle of Power Rangers and Kyle was like, do you want to do something at Image? That I was like, I went through and looked at the ideas and said, oh, that actually could be that could be a superhero story. So yeah, I'd worked on it. It changed in the sense that I think it was more about like looking at it through the prism of being part of a shared universe in the Image universe. That sort of made me go, okay, what's the aesthetic, what's the style, what's the governing principles of that world, you know, and you know how what's the mythology. So it made me just look at it in sort of a different lens. But yeah, it was definitely something I'd been playing with for years and just never found the right. It happens with a lot of stuff with the stuff that I work on. It's like I have a lot of ideas, the same idea you just keep coming back to. It's just finding the right sort of clothes to put on it.
That's awesome. Very insightful look into the process, and it gives us a good idea of how the whole Rogue Sun came to being about. And, you know, I could tell, like, just reading Rogue Sun and then right now hearing you talk about it and all the other podcasts that you've been on, all the other interviews you've done, like, there's a real passion there, and your enthusiasm is very, like, contagious. And it's clear you've read a lot of Image comics specifically, and, you know, that shows a lot in the work. And I love that even in the very first page of Rogue Sun #1, you see, like, you were mentioning with the legacy that like, oh, that's just Rogue Sun. That's okay. If we just stay out of his way, you know, we'll be okay. I just really like that, you know?
Yeah, I was a big fan of the Image comics when I was in the 90s. Like I think I probably ingested all of them. Like just it was I remember I remember when Spawn 1 got released and I went in and I was like, I want that. Because I'd read all the McFarlane's Spider-Man. I was like, that's the coolest stuff ever. And then I was like, Dragon and Youngblood. I got all those. And then I literally was like, I went up to the guy and I was like, if there's an Image #1, just put it in my box. And then I got the box and then I went back next week and I was like $78. I was like, I can't buy all these. And so I bought like 3 and then put them back. And then the week after that, he's like, you don't get a box anymore. And I was like, oh, damn it. And so like, I know what it's like to like really, and then so I would just find other ways. And so basically whenever I'd go to Bakersfield with my grandparents, I was like, can we go to the comic book store? And I would literally just buy every Image book I could get. And so I've read them all. And I loved Image, not because I thought like the stories are the greatest stories in the world in those first days. Like they're good. There's some really good ones in there. But I just thought what was so cool about it was it made me realize that it was a profession and it made me realize, oh, I like the characters, but I love the art better. I love the guys who are making these books. And all of a sudden, Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld and Mark Silvestri and Todd McFarlane, they were like rock stars to me at like that age. And I never forgot that. It made me, they were as big and as important to me as the superheroes that they drew. And I think that's the great gift that Image gave to everybody it was like, it's not just the characters, it's the people who make them. And if you follow them and you give them your patronage, they can really reward you. That's what Robert Kirkman ultimately did. It was like, if you followed him over from Marvel and you're like, you pick up Invincible, man, you were to get that in those early days, to have been able to read Invincible in real time would have been amazing. I didn't get to do that. I came in way late to the game. And so yeah, so that's what I mean. Like, I think that's the thing that Image ultimately gave the world. For me, it was just they made me realize, oh man, like this is what I want to do, and not to be like a rock star. That's not it. I just wanted to do the same thing they were doing, which was come up with fun stories and take the stories that I did when I playing with my action figures and put them on paper and hopefully people can get excited about that. And so that's why I have such an incredible like love and appreciation for Image. And it's an absolutely, it still hasn't quite sunk in sometimes, but I'm like, I got an Image book. Like my character could literally meet one of those characters and like hang out with them or fight them. Like that's crazy. Like I don't deserve that. And so I don't know. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty crazy thing to have happen.
Yeah, I mean, we love I feel like a lot of us like feel the same way. Honestly, looking at you guys, the creators of today. I mean, that's how you guys come up to us, and it's amazing because we were saying like none of us really knew who Abel was before Rogue Sun, and I think that was and that was the biggest revelation for us. It's like we all know who Becca Carey is. We know Ryan Parrott, obviously. I've read That Day; it's amazing. Can't wait for the TV show. We know who Chris O'Halloran is. So it's like obviously we know Michael, but Abel was the first person. Like I never heard of this person, but once I saw his pencils, his artwork, I fell in love immediately. And I know a lot of people even in Discord have talked about even buying some artist booths and whatnot. But speaking of Image and Chris O'Halloran, have you read Ice Cream Man by any chance?
Oh yeah, totally.
Man, it's just I literally just bought the hardcover the other day. Even though I have the issues, I just wanted the collected edition, and that's so good. Chris is just
it's crazy to me because anthologies usually don't work. Like usually it's just that, you need those consistent characters to come back. Not that they never work, but like it's hard to keep them going because it's so easy to get off the train. You know what I mean? It's so easy. It's like, oh, I heard that. You know the end of the story, so you can leave. That's one of the things I always tell you in comics is like never let your audience off the hook or they could leave. And I what's crazy about Ice Cream Man is I was like, well, it's such a simple idea, but then you read it, and the more you read it, it's like it's an anthology, and slowly you're like, oh wait, this isn't an anthology at all, is it? It's actually one big story, and I'm learning about it, and they use the different art styles and the different plays so well. It's a great book. One of my friends, Noah Gardner, is a talented writer as well. That's like his favorite book in the world. He's the one who introduced me to it, so it's really great.
Oh yeah, that's great to hear. It was nice to hear those for your fellow peers. But and one of my last few questions is, I think one thing that I'm very impressed with that you've managed to do as a writer, and of course we've all gushed several times. We are called the Radiant Black Podcast, but we do cover all the Massiveverse books. And speaking of, this joke I wanted to mention because I didn't know you loved Invincible, but now that I know. We actually joked that right when we read Rogue Sun #6 and we all talked about it, we joked that Dylan had his Omni-Mom moment.
Totally.
Yeah, that was a very cool moment to see. But man, yeah, just I love how despite some characters having very brief moments in the comic books, like Byron, like all the side characters we've seen at Dylan's school or even beyond then, they actually you make it you do a good job of making them very impressionable and likable. So are those characters just going to be recurring characters or background characters, or maybe even will they step up eventually to have some minor story arc?
Oh yeah, definitely. Byron, Vanessa, they'll both be in there. Reggie's gonna come back in there eventually at some point. Danny Markinson at some point. Like I'm like those people are like I'm kind of like The Simpsons. I have a little board with all the names and the people on there. So when I go into high school stuff, I'm like, okay, don't forget that person, because like I don't want them to vanish. But yeah, one of the things I literally, it's funny you guys brought that up because I sent my outline for like one of the issues that I sent to Michael, and he was just like, this is all cool, man. He's like, maybe dial back the plot like just a little bit so we can spend a little bit more time just being a high school kid. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Because I get it's that balance, right? It's like I want to give you guys, like, I want to pay off the world. I want to give you the little details and because those are the things that I love as a reader. I love the little details. I love the weird little plot twists and stuff like that. And I want to expand out the world in fun ways. But at the same time, I got to remember it's like 22 pages is a lot of comic, and like we haven't spent a lot of time with some of these characters, and like just giving one of these pages, like giving them 2 extra pages to just be people and tell a story about what it was like growing up, or getting you like doing something that shows them as more than just a side character or the girlfriend or the love interest or the bully. Like if I can make all the people around Dylan slightly more 3-dimensional characters, it'll just make the whole world feel better and richer, and that might be more important than coming up with a cool weapon or a neat MacGuffin. And like so it's like that. I got to remember that it's not just action and MacGuffins. Sometimes it's really about just getting to make these people, making the world feel real and tangible. So I'm trying to make all those people as realistic as possible.
I think you do such a good job with that. It reminds me a little bit in the same sense of, and this is not comparing equality or anything like that, but I think I grew up like, and I know Kyle kind of feels a little bit this way, but I have this guilty like love and pleasure towards Batman Forever. There's just several reasons why I love that movie. It's just, I know people like trash it all the time, but it's just so well, it's very colorful. And I think Rogue Sun is kind of like that. I think Batman Forever had a very distinct looking Gotham that was very colorful, and they did a lot with the visuals in that movie. And I think Rogue Sun is similar in that sense, where all the villains, all the characters are so like there's so much visual, there's so like rich visual, there that there's a lot. There's so much more than it seems, and the colors, like you said, the colors are beautiful. It does such a good job of distinguishing itself from the other Massiveverse books, and I love the orange / red fiery theme it has going on with all the covers. But I'll leave it here with one last question before we conclude. And obviously we've seen the reveals from the cons earlier this year, SDCC and C2E2, and we've seen the amazing character designs of Ornit and Hellbent. Hellbent looks very like one of my favorite characters, Ezreal, so I can't wait for that one.
Oh, damn it.
No, I mean in a great way.
Okay.
So what is there anything that you can tell us about Ornit? Anything at all? Nothing. It doesn't have to be spoilery. Just anything.
Ornate is one. I loved the design. I told Abel, I was like, hey, we got this sort of time twisting villain that's gonna come up, and I was sort of like, just whatever you want to do with it. Like, I don't have a lot of the only thing that I thought was like, there's a censer that he holds, which is the thing that in Catholic Church when you walk in they have that sort of like the incense burner, and I was like, I think there would be something really cool to having him have like an incense burner, because we could use the smoke in lots of really fun ways. And so I was like, let's play with that. And then he sent me that one drawing of the character. That's the one we showed, and that's the one drawing he sent me, and I was like, we're done. That's it. Nice job. I hate he does that all the time. Yeah, it's so crazy. It's like at some point he's not gonna be able to do that. At some point he's gonna send me something, and I'm gonna be like, no, but I don't know when that day will come. But when it comes to the character, I think that's what's fun is like I usually write towards like an idea for a character, and then once I get the design, it changes the way that I'm like, all of a sudden I'm like, okay, now I can visualize them. Now I tweak it. So Ornate started off as sort of being more like a ghoul, like more like kind of like I don't know how the best way to describe it, more like a Schmeagol kind of thing, where he was just like taunting you from like the corners. And when I saw sort of the refined design that Ornate that he gave me, it just changed the way that I wrote the character entirely. And that was a lot of fun. So that's the best I could say for Ornate, was like, it's some of the fun is you get a design back and it just changes it. But I loved the idea. And I guess I'll say the one thing I would say is they are not so much a physical villain as they are, I don't even know if villain's the right word, as a physical opponent. And their intentions are very what they want and why they're doing this is very specific to the moment in Dylan's life that we find him. I don't know if does that make sense? Like, that's like where Dylan's at right now. That's the reason this character is there. They wouldn't have shown up 3 months ago, and they wouldn't show up 3 months from now. They would only show up at this moment.
That's awesome.
So that's it. And then Hellbent is just like, it's funny. I'm sorry, Kyle. Kyle was like, didn't love that name when I pitched it, but I was like, I'm keeping it. I'm gonna stick to my guns. I like Hellbent. It sounds cool.
It is cool.
It is cool, and I love how you worked it into the solicit. Nice wordplay there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was like, I'm trying to be tricky. But he was, and he came, but he told me, he was like, you know what? I came around and I'm used to it. I was like, yeah, it just takes a little while. But I love that design. I'm a big fan of, I think I said I'm a sucker for hoods and swords. And I just thought there was something cool and sort of mysterious about the character. And then there's been some people have noticed too. It's like there's a little bit of the armor that you see on him is similar in style to the Rogue Sun armor. So like that's on purpose. So yeah, I mean, he's a bit of a dark mirror. I'm always a big fan of characters having to come face to face with people that make them look inside themselves and see and can see who they are and the decisions they made. So that's Hellbent. I've sort of equated a little bit like to the Venom of it all. Like, I don't think he's going to be exactly that, but I would love to make Hellbent like a permanent bad guy in the story, like the one that sticks around the long haul, because I like what they do to Dylan as a character. Here you go. Let's see if you're as smart and as strong as you think you are. So that was the intention. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thank you guys for what you guys do. Like, I've listened to your podcast. I have. It's been very nice. You get nervous. Usually when I don't want to write, I'm like, oh, the Radiant Black podcast is up. Well, I'll see what they thought of. Let's see what they said about Kyle's book or my book or whatever, and I'll listen to a little bit of it. But I appreciate it so much. Like the level of thought you guys put into this, and the fact that you're able, like, I think iron sharpens iron a little bit. Like you reading into this level of detail and asking the questions and taking this stuff so seriously, it forces us to live up to that standard, and it forces us to try and hopefully find ways to keep you excited and interested. And if you stop doing this podcast, I guarantee you we're going to notice and be like, oh, we're doing something wrong, guys. And so like,
so what you're saying is Dylan would definitely be putting us in lockers if we were still in high school. That's what you're ultimately saying.
All for you across the thing. It'd be like that. You can't do that on television. You guys have to talk to each other through the thing. That's probably dating me. But anyways, yes, he would definitely be bullying all of you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. This was awesome. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, man.
Yeah, thank you so much. You have a great day, and we'll have you back on hopefully at the end of the next arc, and we can talk more Rokusan.
Oh God, if that'll be great, because hopefully that means we're doing an arc after that, which would be even better. So like, it's like woohoo, yeah.
Thanks. Stay radiant.